Um, where are we? Yeah, I don't know where we are either. This is weird. Are we like dead? Did we finally have that heart attack in the middle of a game, and is this just heaven? This isn't heaven. This is the light lab. This is where we get to have fun with special effects lighting. Wait a second. That you can control all the lights in here. Does that mean that? Woo! This never gets old. So we're here in the fancy room for a fancy occasion. Vegas Golden Knights win Game 3 over the Edmonton Oilers by a final score of 5-1. Yeah! Hit him with that Uno reverse card. Started out with the exact same lineups as Game 3, despite Laurent Brossoit getting absolutely shelled in Game 2, giving up as many goals as he did, and being yanked for Adin Hill in the third period. Everything seemed like it was going to be just a normal run-of-the-mill Golden Knights game, and starting off the game, Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl were also paired together, which comes as a surprise to absolutely no one. So the game gets underway, and it appears as if the Golden Knights actually get off to a good start, unlike what they did in Vegas during Game 2. We're controlling a lion's share of the offensive zone time, had a good amount of pressure throughout a good chunk of the game, but ultimately weren't able to land any good offensive chances, especially in the first few minutes when they had the puck in the offensive zone. The Edmonton Oilers, on the other hand, weren't really able to do very much when it comes to generating offense in those first few minutes, and were really on their heels from the Golden Knights' initial offensive push. Ultimately, after the first few pushes by the Golden Knights were ultimately made futile by good defensive play by Stuart Skinner and the Edmonton Oilers, the Oilers finally get a rush going the other direction in the form of a 2-on-1. This would become a bit of a trend, especially as the first period goes on. 2-on-1s were uncomfortably common in the early part of this game. It ultimately led to the Golden Knights defender boxing out the initial Oilers skater, but then Warren Foegele came flying into the middle of the ice, kind of like, got all the way to the net completely untouched, and ultimately, if you give a guy with that much skill, that much time and space, he's going to tip it by. Laurent Brossoit played the back of his stick as if it was to cut off the seam pass, and it was a seam pass. Problem was the shooter was going to the near post and not the far post, and ultimately Foegele tips it in, and the Edmonton Oilers score for their first goal of the game, take a 1-0 lead. That's the third straight game that they've scored first, and the arena's jumping already. Ultimately, at this point in the game, I'm genuinely terrified that it's about to go exactly how Game 2 went. The Golden Knights come out after giving up that goal, and they look a little bit flat. They're having a hard time getting into the offensive zone because the Edmonton Oilers are putting 3 players on the offensive blue line for the Golden Knights, and that's really hard to get past for a team that likes to carry the puck in. This was a similar problem that they had against the Winnipeg Jets, particularly in Game 1 of that first round series. And mercifully, for this case, they adjusted to that quickly. About 4 minutes into the game, the Golden Knights decided to finally go to a more chip and chase offense, which has not really worked for them throughout most of the regular season, but desperate times, desperate measures. And ultimately, the first line is able to get a good chip in, do some good work on the forecheck, and ultimately, Jonathan Marchessault get the puck kind of in the corner, kind of kick it out on a float pass. It was like a shot block that got chipped up in the air. Ultimately, Eichel caught it right below the right circle, kind of put it down, lost control, but ultimately Jonathan Marchessault was able to grab the puck, wrap it around from the front of the net across Stuart Skinner's body and inside the far post to knot the game up at 1. So ultimately, that was a good answer back by the Golden Knights. That's exactly what you need to do. Kind of gets the crowd out of it a little bit, having scored like about 2 minutes prior. It was very similar to the effect that it had on Game 1 when the Golden Knights answered back quickly. It allows the air to be taken out of the building, and in some ways it makes the game feel like it never broke 0-0 in the first place, as both goals were scored on what could be seen as defensive mistakes and or your goalie needing to make a save. But regardless, it's 1-1. And Jonathan Marchessault's on the board. He hadn't scored a goal the entire postseason. And from experience, when that guy gets hot, he gets really hot. Now, not a lot would happen for the remainder of the first period, but when we get inside the last minute, the push kind of comes around, and ultimately, the Golden Knights would need to make something happen. One of the rare instances where they were able to carry the puck across the blue line actually happened. Jack Eichel getting around a couple of defenders who were caught flat-footed and ultimately allowed him to get to the outside where he hadn't been very dangerous. Unfortunately for them, they forgot about the fact that we like to hit these things called seam passes. And ultimately, Jack Eichel would throw a seam pass across the middle of the ice from the near circle, finding Jonathan Marchessault, who was tied up with, I believe it was Warren Foegele, the goal scorer for the Edmonton Oilers. And ultimately, he would be able to tip it past Stuart Skinner, who had completely sold out on Eichel's shot, with less than a minute to go to give the Golden Knights a 2-1 lead.
Yeah, baby, yeah.
I wish I could record in here every day. It's so much fun. The one thing that we didn't cover, which I intentionally skipped over because the first period, especially after the Oilers scored their first goal, was actually a net positive for the Golden Knights. It definitely looked like they were the better team. Unfortunately, that one goal lead going into the intermission came at a rather steep cost in the form of Laurent Brossoit leaving the game with about 8 minutes to go in the first period. It was a 3-on-1. I believe it was Kane, Draisaitl, and McDavid, and he made the initial save on a kind of a shot from the near boards. Ultimately pushed over to his right to make what would be the next save. The shot never came, mercifully. But on that push, he looks like he may have injured his lower body, akin to the way that Logan Thompson did against the Minnesota Wild the second game after the All-Star break. So he left the game. And at the time of recording this, it looks like he won't be returning in the series nigh on the playoffs. We'll have to see because, the way the NHL is with injuries, you never really know. So ultimately, the net was turned over to Adin Hill. Now, Adin Hill has been a good goalie throughout the entire season, and I wouldn't be overly worried about that. He won plenty of games for us this regular season, which is good. But when you're coming off the bench cold against the most high-octane offense in the NHL, you really need your team to back you up a little bit, and back them up they did. You got this, Adin. It ain't no thing. And oddly enough, with that injury, that actually brings Jonathan Quick back into the fold as the backup goalie. Wait, me? I haven't played a game like a month and a half. So now the second period would begin, and it would be a flurry of activity. The Golden Knights are not the strongest team in the second period historically, throughout this regular season or throughout this postseason, and the Oilers are yet to have a power play. Now, the Golden Knights start the second period on the power play because of one of the stupidest things I think I have ever seen in my years of paying attention to hockey. With 1 second left in the first period, the Golden Knights win a neutral zone faceoff back to Alex Pietrangelo. Pietrangelo skates backwards into his zone. The other 8 players on the ice, inclusive of himself, decide that the play is over. All right, guys, let's just time it out. Let's take this lead in the intermission. Surprisingly, or not surprisingly, given the events of Game 2, one Evander Kane enters the chat and decides to, in a very obvious attempt to axe murder the Golden Knights defenseman. So the Golden Knights start the period on the power play. Unfortunately, the power play wouldn't be successful, albeit it would do two things. One, allow the Golden Knights to acclimate to the second period to give Adin Hill more time to get ready. But two, it's 2 minutes that the Oilers couldn't score on the power play. That's how critical keeping the Oilers off the man advantage has been this season. And ultimately, there would be about 8 minutes, especially following the Golden Knights power play, where not a lot would happen. Leon Draisaitl, who had hit 2 posts in the first period, had kind of fallen quiet. Connor McDavid was being Connor McDavid, and by that he was complaining every time the whistle blew. And ultimately, it would be kind of a quiet game until about the 10-minute mark, where everybody's on pins and needles. The game is halfway over, and despite the Golden Knights actually not controlling the most opportunities, with the very clear and obvious bias being towards Draisaitl's 2 hit posts and the fact that they've had like 9 odd man rushes to this point, it would actually be the Golden Knights that would get the puck to fall their way next. Riley Smith would take the puck high in the zone. I believe it was Riley Smith anyway. Would get the puck high in the zone, move it back to Zach Whitecloud at the point, who would give it back to the forward, who would draw the two Oilers defenders, one a forward and one a defenseman, away from the middle of the ice, leaving the puck, of course, for Zach Whitecloud. Now, Zach Whitecloud had 5 goals this regular season. 5. And I know he didn't play a full season, so he probably would have gotten 10 if he didn't have his 2 devastating knee injuries throughout the regular season. But that's neither here nor there. What matters is Zach Whitecloud, decided to do what he does in playoff games. He's done this. He did this most famously against the Vancouver Canucks in the bubble in the second round. I believe it was Game 7, going short side shelf on then goalie Thatcher Demko. Well, he must have that spot and that shot in his head, because he walks down the near boards, sees his spot, and goes short side shelf on Stuart Skinner to give the Golden Knights a 3-1 lead. And it's Whitecloud, not of the toilet paper company. And so whether we can look over what SportsCenter said after the game with regards to this White Cloud goal, the fact of the matter is Zach Whitecloud scores the first Golden Knights defensive scored goal of the entire postseason, which is saying something given that they historically have one of the best defense scorers when it comes to scoring, whether it be assists or goals. So ultimately it is now 3-1. And it feels like the game is starting to get out of hand. And it was, one of the prized defensemen of the Edmonton Oilers in the form of Evan Bouchard that was the one who took the bait that ultimately allowed Zach Whitecloud to walk from essentially the neutral zone all the way to the dot and score on Skinner. And unfortunately for Bouchard, his night would continue to get much, much, much worse. As just a few minutes later, Jack Eichel would get a puck kind of floating around in the offensive or in the defensive zone, high in the zone above the circles. He would take it, and it would be a simple 2-on-2 with Jonathan Marchessault coming on the near boards and Eichel on the far boards. They get across the defensive blue line, and everything looks like it's going to be okay, and Eichel just has to beat Bouchard over the red line, and it will be a clean 2-on-1. The thing is, Bouchard was thinking about that red line too much, and, well... I got him. Ultimately, Jack Eichel's too fast, and Bouchard fell over the red line, and he would go in on a clean 2-on-1. Now, Jonathan Marchessault had almost scored on a 2-on-1 like less than a minute before, so that thought was clearly in Skinner's mind. Eichel goes with the toe drag, shoots it back across his toe drag, going far side on Skinner, making it a 4-1 Golden Knights lead.
Yeah, baby.
So then, a few minutes later, after Eichel's goal of the game to give the Golden Knights a 3-goal lead, it's pretty imperative that you put away a team when they're down. The fans have very obviously turned in Edmonton, and they're starting to think that things aren't going to go very well. Now, obviously, it's incumbent upon the Oilers to ultimately make a push, and of course, they'd make a push. But in terms of making a push, you're bound to make a mistake. And mistakes do get made in the form of how on earth do you let Alec Martinez get behind your defense? Now, it wasn't a breakaway, and he did a good job cutting from the far side of the ice to the middle of the ice. And, you had just switched out, Stuart Skinner for Jack Campbell because you were basically phoning it in. Granted, the last time you were down 3 in a playoff game and you pulled Skinner, you came back and beat the LA Kings. But that's not important. What's important is Alec Martinez got to the middle of the ice, took a shot, it was saved. But ultimately, Campbell misplayed it or got wiped out, as we would find out. And Nick Waugh got it in behind the goalie. Puck was sitting in the puck was sitting in the middle of the ice. Nick Waugh got it behind him, in the net. It's now 5-1.
Wait.
There's a coach's challenge. Yeah, there was a coach's challenge. And nobody's excited by it. And mostly it's me, because as soon as the puck went in and I saw where Jack Campbell wound up, I knew that it was going to come back. Now, I've had personal experience with Jack Campbell when he was a member of the Texas Stars. I got to do a goalie skate with him back when I played, which was really cool. But I also learned in that instance, he's a big guy and he's very strong, and he doesn't fall over unless he is pushed over. And in this case, according to the officials and according to Toronto, he got pushed over. So yeah, that wasn't exactly ideal, and it is still 4-1. It's important for the Golden Knights to get going again. Wait a second, why are the goal lights still on? So yeah, Nick Waugh got denied a goal. And then like 12 seconds later, he gives what is arguably the greatest setup pass I have ever seen to Chandler Stevenson, who tips it past Jack Campbell within seconds of the goal getting called back. So it was 5-1, and then it became 4-1, and then it was 5-1 again before you could blink, and so there's no reason to be upset. Oh, I'm 1,000% certain this guy can find a way to be upset. Hey, don't slander me. I'm just upset that it's not 6-1, okay? Okay. And ultimately, that's where the second period would end, and shockingly, that's where the scoring would end, as the game would conclude 5-1. Now, it could have been 5-2, as the Golden Knights did concede a full Edmonton power play late in the game, just like it could have been 6-1, as the Golden Knights also got another power play, ultimately going 0 for 4 in the game. The important thing is, this is the first time this playoffs that the Edmonton Oilers didn't score a power play goal in a game, going 0 for 2 on a 47-second power play that they almost gave up a shorthanded goal on, and then a full 2-minute power play that wound up being completely inconsequential with 3 minutes to go. So where the series stands now is very interesting, because I've got reason to be confident, but at the same time, it's only coming down to game 4. Now, I don't want to say it because I feel like I'm tempting the wrath of high atop the thing. And so I feel like as soon as I'm done saying this, I'll have to go outside, turn around 3 times and curse or spit or whatever they said on West Wing that one time. 1, 2, 3. Whoa, I'm dizzy. Yeah, all those things. The Golden Knights haven't lost a regulation game on the road since the middle of March. They're 3-0 on the road this postseason, and one more win on the road would give them a stranglehold 3-1 lead on this series. And ultimately, with 2 of the next 3 games being at the Fortress, I'm not going to say it's over, but it would put the Golden Knights in a very good position to be what everybody thinks is impossible, to be the team that beats the Edmonton Oilers in 2023. So ultimately, how do I feel about this game? I feel pretty good. The team played strong defense, they played a strong penalty kill, they played smart, they played disciplined, they played within their structure. And not only did they do that, they adjusted amazingly quickly to anything that the Oilers could throw at them, whether it be a different defensive scheme in stacking the blue line like teams in the past have done, albeit, they kind of may have taken a page out of the playbook from the Montreal Canadiens of 2021, the Dallas Stars of 2020, and the Washington Capitals of 2018 Stanley Cup Final. The point is, they adjusted quickly, they got to their forecheck, and they've proven now in 2 out of 3 games that when the Golden Knights' forecheck is working harder, there is no way that the Oilers can keep up with that forecheck. I cannot count the number of 50-50 pucks that the forecheckers for the Golden Knights won that led directly to scoring chances. Mark Stone alone could have had 2 goals just on the back of good forechecking, whether it be by Brett Howden or by Chandler Stevenson on his line. Especially one in the first period, before the Golden Knights had even scored, Howden won a 50-50 puck behind the net, kicked it out to Stone, and if he hadn't shot it into Stuart Skinner's gloves, it would have been him that broke the ice and not Jonathan Marchessault. So I'm going to let that sink in, and obviously the Golden Knights know this, but also the Edmonton Oilers know this, and so I'd be surprised if the next game does the same thing. It was expected that this would be a high-scoring series, and that's not a surprise. There were 10 goals in the first game, and then 6 goals in games 2 and game 3. And the team that won needs to score 5 goals to win, obviously, with the Golden Knights scoring 6 and 5, and the Oilers scoring 5 in their eventual 2 games to 1 lead for the Golden Knights. And I wouldn't expect that trend to change, especially with the way that the Oilers play defense and the fact that I'm not entirely sure whether it's going to be Jack Campbell or Stuart Skinner in the net tomorrow night. Either way, it'll be posing an interesting challenge for the Golden Knights, who themselves are on their second-string goalie, and we're one bad instance or one lost edge by Evander Kane away from having to play Jonathan Quick in the playoffs. That's not a bad thing. It's just an observation that we have to be mentally ready for, and honestly, that's just where we're at right now, and that's not a bad thing. The fact that all these goalies have played so many games means not only have they been battle-tested and acclimated to the system, as opposed to, the Carolina Hurricanes going to, their backup goalie when they were getting blown out the night prior. These goalies have been in the system the whole year. Adin Hill won 17 games this year, and he was the backup. That's enough in a system without Logan Thompson to be the day 1 starter. But obviously Laurent Brossoit earned it, and now that he's out injured, it's Adin Hill's series, it's his net, until he either loses it or gets hurt himself. So it's a decent situation to be in. With Game 4 coming up tomorrow, as of the day of recording this, it's going to be very interesting to see how the Oilers respond. I'm going to assume they're going to play a lot more defensively minded and also run a lot more of their offense through McDavid and Draisaitl, which is to be expected. But ultimately, it's very obvious that the Golden Knights were ready for that. They expected it, and it is what it is. They'll find a way to adjust to it, and I've got the utmost confidence that Bruce Cassidy will keep this team on the straight and narrow. And as I said in my season preview, if the Golden Knights can stay out of the box or limit the Oilers to 1 power play goal or less per game, it should be pretty straightforward win in 6. Granted, if they do it 2 more times, they'll win in 5. So I'll be optimistic. And so with that being said, thank you for watching. Comment down below if you want to talk to me. Subscribe if you enjoy this fun lighting. Like it, subscribe, tell all your friends. We got a series.